I'm always concerned that I'm losing a class. So we are recording. We are recording. Um, and especially when you don't really get to the super fun and dynamic stuff, right? More dynamic stuff until Web 2. So I'm calling an audible today. An audible is where you just make a change at the last minute. And the audible that I'm calling today is this idea of, well, how do we do, stuff like this? How do we get to this point where stuff's moving and sliding? How do we get to a point where, Colin, we get to do some animation? Because right now everything has been very dry, and I've said that many times. It's like, oh wow, that is awesome. How do we get to do stuff like this? Okay, you'll notice there's no JavaScript in this whatsoever. Congratulations, you know Pug. Congratulations, right? You already know whatever is whatever this stuff is right here. It's a CSS variable, by the way. How can that be, Colin? Well, what does Pug become? Okay, now what I'm looking at here is a random example that showed up on the CodePen homepage. Here is a random example on the CodePen homepage. I've done nothing with this. I didn't even know this thing existed till 2 seconds ago. So what does Pug become? Pug becomes, watch this, ready? Pug becomes what? Pug turns into the Pug language, P-U-G, turns into what? Anybody? Where's my mouse cursor?
HTML.
Right. And so all this stuff becomes what? Josh, thanks for answering.
CSS.
Yeah. Guess what 2 things you're learning?
HTML and CSS.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Josh. The point I'm trying to make here is you understand more of this than you might think. Right. And anytime we get onto CodePen, we get like look at these awesome examples, right? What I want you to do is just go ahead and take a look at and just look at this and say, like, I know this, right? Haml is another language, right? Haml becomes HTML. And SCSS, which also known as Sass, becomes CSS. Okay. So the point I'm trying to make here is there's all these languages, like, right? All these become HTML. All of these, right, become CSS, and all of these, right, become JavaScript. And if you learn the things these languages become, you can learn whatever pro and con to the new hotness is, right? And the reason people use Pug or Haml is one, they might work at a company that requires this, and the other one is it might provide some features that HTML doesn't have. It's also syntactic sugar, because writing this would be very cumbersome. And what Haml allows you to do, okay, is write it like this. And this is just syntactic sugar. Look at all that, right? It takes 13 lines of code, and it turns it into, right, all of that. And I'm hoping today that you'll get excited, because I'm trying to win you back today, right? And part of the win you back is, let's go make some stuff move. Let's go make some stuff fade in and out. Let's go do some things that are a little bit more dynamic, and we can apply that back to our websites, okay? All right, so today is a win you back day, right? Because we've been looking at some very rote material. Hope I'm spelling that right. Okay, let's get into this. All right, please get into the professor pen. I'm gonna turn off suggestions because you don't need to see all those. All right. Let's see here, Notion. Just a quick note on Notion. Notion has changed their pricing plan, and the free plan is really good. So I highly recommend that you go ahead and create an account. Next class, we'll return to our templates and we'll return to the project that we're making. For right now, let's do some fun stuff. All right, I want to take a look at transition and transform. So let's go ahead and pop open the professor pen. And to understand transitions, let's start with transforms. Okay, so we did all this media query stuff and we talked about DPI and all those things, but really let's have some fun with this, right? Okay, get rid of all that, hit save and close on this. So this week's going to be some transition and transform, and hopefully we can apply this to some of our template. All right, to make this work, we're going to make a simple div. I'm going to div in here. I'm going to give it a background color. Okay, I'm going to make it pick a color. I'm always using coral. How about cornflower blue? give it a height of 100 pixels and a width of 100 pixels. And here you have this very, very boring square. All right, good there? So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at some transforms property, transform. And when we get into animation, one of the first things we need to know is really 3 parts to make animation go. And the first one we're going to address today is transform. And then we're going to get into transition. And all these are on your course website, but don't want to go back and forth here. Transition, and then we finally have keyframe animation. If we understand these 3 concepts, we'll be fine to animate stuff. Okay. All right, good there. And then we're going to use something we haven't addressed quite yet, and it's called Flexbox, and this is for alignment. And see here if I can remember how to use Flexbox. I just want to center this image, this div vertically and horizontally. So I'm going to change the display property from blocks to block to inline. Nope, we're going to change it to flex. And we're going to align content center. And then justify content center. All right. And oh, we don't want that on the child element. Duh. We want that, put that on the parent. And what we're doing is we're just getting set up to actually do animation. All right. Okay, justify, oh, what is it? It's not align content. I'm gonna have to find that out. Justify content center, we just did align items. There we go, that's the one I'm looking for. All right, that should put it dead center. Yeah, we need to change the height. What I'm doing here is all this hacky stuff, 100 VH, because we want to push the parent down. There we go. Okay. There are entire websites dedicated to vertically and horizontally aligning stuff. There are many ways to do what I just did there. Yeah. And this is that stuff that we will break down, and this is where I don't want to lose you, right? So for today, can we just take this as read? Right, just take this as gospel for today. Just it is what it is for today. All right, so much so I'm gonna close that up. All right, thumbs, you with me? Emojis, let me know that you're there. All right, so now we got this div. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take this box model property, and the best thing about transitions and transform is they are performant. They are performant. Animation before required you to download this thing called the Adobe Flash plugin, okay? And remember, you used to go to websites and say, please update Flash. You probably still go. All right, in 2020, in 2019, if you go to a website and says, ask you to update Flash, don't do it, okay? Because this is going away, right? Who's killing off Adobe Flash? Let me answer that question for you. Adobe is killing off Flash. Why is that? Why is the company who makes this thing, right, getting rid of it? They're slowly dropping support for this. Well, the reason is because Flash isn't performant, right? And Flash doesn't run on mobile devices and many other devices, right? Now, this is Flash, the plugin, not the actual tool, right? All right. So what we want to be able to do is have those same features and be able to animate and skew and morph and do all those things. Okay? But what we don't have to do is rely on a plugin, and that's how we do it in modern web design. So we have this div here. Let's go ahead and transform this thing. I'm going to go ahead and use the transform property. And then we're going to use a method inside of that property. And you have already been introduced to this, right? Anytime you load in a background image. Okay, and so the first one we're going to do is rotate. Rotate. Okay. What I want you to do is to start forking these pens today, right? So we're going to rotate this thing. We're going to rotate it 45 DEG. Okay. And there you go. We have rotated this image 45 DEG. Now what I want you to do is actually make this div :hover. So now when we hover over our div, I want it to rotate 45 DEG. So before it's like this, and if we hover over it, then it rotates. Okay. So what we're doing is we're changing the box model properties. But if we inspect this thing, right, as far as the browser knows, this thing hasn't changed. That's why this is performant. Right, that's why this thing isn't going to make your, if you go to a website and your fans spin up, the designers and the developers did it wrong. your fan should not spin up on a website. That means something else is going wrong, right? That's when we need to take a look at the network tab and the performance tab and the memory tab and all these other tabs right here. But so to avoid a lot of that, like use, right, a perform method to do, right? Perform means it's optimized, it runs fast. I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger so we can see it. All right, good, good. So there's rotate. You can also do negative degrees and go the other direction, okay? All right, check with me on rotate. All right, so there's transform rotate. I'm gonna go ahead and comment that out. Then we're gonna use that transform property again. All right, already this is hard for me to teach. Why? Because in the future, you're not gonna be typing transform. You're just gonna be typing, all right, ready for this magic? Doesn't this make a lot more sense? If I asked you to say, which one rotates this negative 45 degrees? The first one or the second one? Right, most people would say the second one, right? Change this, rotate it. How much? 45 degrees. But in 2020, that's how we have to type it. In the future, we're going to be typing it differently. So it goes. But the language is what the language is. So we're going to go ahead and use the transform property. And we're going to use the rotate method. So there's rotate. All right, the next one we're going to have is scale. Okay. And we're going to scale this thing. All right, so right now this thing is 200 pixels square. Okay, simple math says, well, if I rotate it by a scale of 1, and 1 stands for 100, nothing changes. But what happens when I put in 3? It is now visually, right, 600 pixels, 600 times the size. Okay, so it's transformed with a scale of 3. Come on, CodePen. Go with me here. All right, now, why isn't it getting 3 times the size? What do I need to do to make it 3 times the size?
You have to
Hover
scroll
over it.
over it.
Perfect. Go ahead and hover over it. What I'm getting you ready for, right, is this calling concept, copyright calling code 2020, right? There's very few things that I think, right, but we can get into an argument about whether or not there's original thought. There is none. But we have this idea of the first frame of animation and the last frame of animation. So normally I'm in a room with a bunch of big whiteboard and Post-it notes. And I get on the board and I put these Post-it notes. And I said, here is your first frame of animation. Like, here's your stick figure, right? This is no different than when you're bored in class and you're making a flip book. And you make the first frame and you make the last frame of animation. And then you go to the browser. Hey, browser, can you draw in every single frame in between? And the browser goes, I'm really good at that. I'm good at counting, right? I'm good at measuring. I'm a machine, right? And so your browser is drawing those other sizes. So as far as the browser knows, this thing never became any bigger than what it was originally 200, even though we hovered over it. But visually, it's 3 times the size. That's where this is performant. Yeah. So we can also do decimals. So if we do 0.5, right? So half of 200, if I hover over it, it gets smaller. Okay, now watch see that little jankiness right there? That's because our mouse cursor is leaving the element as it's getting smaller, as it's getting redrawn. And we'll figure out ways to deal with that later on, but that's what that jumpiness is there. All right, that's scale. I know I'm moving kind of quickly because I want to get to the good stuff. All right, that's scale. I'm gonna skip skew for right now. Okay, there's other properties. All right, let's go ahead now and take a look at translate. Okay, and there's scale. So we can go ahead and 2 would be 200%. Okay. All right, there are many transform properties. This one we're going to do is translate. All right, so we have translate X and we have translate Y. Okay. All right, so these are different properties. Okay. And again, why this is performant is the page doesn't have to get redrawn. It drew this once, it painted this screen once, and then as this thing gets moved on the screen, it doesn't have to paint it again. So other methods that you'll see on the internet aren't performant, and you can actually measure, okay, in a different class, different lecture, we can actually measure which animation runs more smoothly than the other one, even though visually they might look the same, okay? And, you know, to all the coding types out there, I don't have to talk to you about, you know, optimize code. All right, so we're gonna go 100 pixels on the X, and then we're gonna go 100 pixels on the Y. And if we hover over this, right, there it goes. It moved down 100 pixels in each direction. And you can use other units if you wanted to in there, percentages and right? But pixels will work for us. Common thing to do, and because this looks like translatex and this looks like translate, you'll commonly see the capital X and the capital Y, just so you can specify that. You'll also see, instead of separating them, you'll see a comma between the two values and just using the one translate. And this is more commonplace right there. So we're going to do the exact same thing, right? But just on one call, right? And this is no different than your font family and font, or font size and font weight. We just group them all together in the font property. Okay, so on line 21, that code is very confusing. I'm translating on a transform, and it's going to get more confusing when we translate on a transform on a transition. Say that 3 times fast. We're translating on a transform on a transition. 3rd time, right? We're using the translate method on the transform property, and we're going to transition those on our hover. So what we're doing here is we're going to have the browser draw all these different frames of animation, right? So to make sure I don't lose you anymore, I'm going to go ahead and move up the transition lecture. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead now and let's go back to our rotate one. So we have our first frame of animation, right? And we have our last frame of animation. And you know, you got better stuff to do than come in here and go negative 43 degrees, negative 44 degrees. Browser, help me out. You can do this already. So to do that, the property that we're gonna use here, and this is where this gets a little bit confusing here, is we're gonna use the transition property. Okay, transition. All right, so the transition property, without using the shorthand. Well, first let's go ahead and just do this real fast, so you can see what is happening, and then we'll break it down. All right, there you go. What do you need Colin for? You can go to all over CodePen and you can copy and paste this all day long, right? On your okay. On here, there's a list of all these other resources, all of those right there. You can link out to all these different places where you can get examples. Right, there's even a GUI for CSS trend. What is it called? Here we go. Animista. Okay, I'll link out to this. There's a lot of services like this. Okay, ready? Don't need Colin. Here, I want this thing to scale down, and I'm gonna change the direction of this. I'm gonna change this thing called easing out and blah, blah, blah. All right, there you go. And you're gonna come into here and scale it down, right? Just pick what you like. Click this button right here, right? Copy, paste the code, done. What just happened there? Right, oh, forget this, right? I don't have to listen. I don't have to listen to lecture anymore. I'm just gonna go ahead and, ooh, I want this thing to swing. Cool. I want this thing to flip and scale. Cool. Right. My question to you is use these, especially this service right here, right? This was made by great designers, right? They have a great service. I'll link out some other ones. I don't mind that you use these tools, right? Same thing I've broken record, but I've been repeating all quarter long is I want you to understand what these tools are doing. Okay. So we're good there. All right, Colin, we're sold. You don't have to keep beating that drum. All right, so let's go ahead and begin to break this down. Okay, so this is the shorthand. Let's do the longhand before we get this. We have a transition. We're going to transition the property there. And what property are we transitioning here? And this is one of the most confusing parts. Okay, but you know this from the things that I repeat over and over 3 times over. What property are we transitioning? What property is making it rotate negative 45 degrees? What property?
Is it transform?
Transform. All right. I didn't get to see who said that. Who was that? Josh, was that you? All right. All right. Josh, that is one of the hardest questions I get asked in Web 1, because most people, Josh, would probably say rotate. Right. That is the value to rotate. The value here, okay, is this function to make it rotate. As we know from CSS, follow my cursor, right? There's our selector, this div, property, and our value. So in this CSS rule, there are right all the way back to week 1, week 2, okay? There are three, this is a CSS rule with 3 declarations, and a declaration is made of a property and a value. Why is this so important? Because this is relatively one of the easy ones, and they get a lot more complicated. And you're going to say stuff like, oh, you have to transition the property. And sometimes people are going to write rotate, and they get mad, and nothing happens. Okay, they didn't follow the instructions. The instructions, you got to transition a property. The property happens to be transformed. And I understand completely why this is confusing. Okay, so to make this very, very apparent and make this very, very clear, let's not transition this transform. Let's transition something else. Let's come up into here in our div. We're going to set the opacity to 0. Let's hide the thing. Right, let's hide it completely. And then on our last frame, we're going to set the opacity back to 1. Right, so now what we want to do, so first off, what you want to do now is just get this working. Draw your first frame, draw your last frame. I implore you to, like, one of the few times you gotta listen to me, this will save you hours, is make sure you can get this working first off. Get this working before you worry about all of the frames or tweens in between, okay? Before you worry about all the frames in between or tweens, okay, and if you've taken any motion class, you'll know exactly what a tween is. Show of hands, you've taken a motion class. All right, after Web 1, you're gonna take motion with Professor Huscherlid. Okay, great class, really breaks down motion design. Okay, all right, so now that we got that, we're going to use I'm going to use a shorthand real quick. We're going to transition what? We're going to transition the opacity. And for right now, just do 1S, hover over it. Now, normally in a class, this is where everybody goes, ooh and ah, but I can't hear y'all. So I'm assuming that you're saying ooh and ah. Look at this thing, right? It's fading in. But you're like, it's a little janky. Well, this is part of why I'm here. If you take this transform property and you put it in the first frame, not the last frame, watch what happens. Okay. It's going to actually transform both forwards and back. Oh, I got this backwards. Let's set this to 1, make this thing 0 again. Okay, so we're going to not transform. Y'all, I just messed that up. What did I just mess up? Look what I just did there, right? I've been talking this entire lecture about don't mess up transform and transition. What did I just do? Mess up transform and transition, right? We're transitioning, okay? What property? Opacity in 1 second, and there we go. Okay, and now notice it's jumping back to the first frame. So as soon as I hover off it, it jumps back. And what we want to do, if you want it to animate in both directions, okay, if you want to animate in both directions, you have to put the transition on the first frame. And so the transition basically chases itself, it chases its tail. Okay, so when it's on the last frame, it just goes from the first frame to the last frame. But if you put it back in the first frame, the animation will loop back, right? The animation is going to loop back. And notice, as soon as I hover off, right, it's no longer rotated. Because the only property that we're animating right now is opacity. And if we wanted to animate multiple properties, we have to tell the browser, hey, spin this thing and fade it out and fade it in. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay. All right. So before we do that, right, let's go ahead and get back to transition. Okay. We have a transition property. And what property are we animating? In this case, opacity. And then we have transition. Let me get all my transition properties here. Transition duration, okay. And in that case, it's 1 second. All right, and what we're doing here is 1 second transition duration. Here, let me get I'm gonna look this up. Transition properties. Should be on our cssreference.io.
I think you might have replaced the semicolon with a normal colon.
Oh, thank you. Did I spell that wrong? Oh, thanks. All right, thanks, Josh. There we go. Now it's this is working. There's 2 other properties that we need to know here. It's transition. There we go. There's transition delay. And this says, now this is good, right? Even at 0.5 seconds, a half second, okay? Because what you want, what you don't want is to jar your users, and this is just good user experience, right? This even the slightest delay, otherwise it happens too fast. Especially when we start learning JavaScript, you get to a website and things just start moving all over the place. You don't want that. You want it to feel a little bit more organic. Okay. All right. So then the last one, speaking of organic, is transition timing function. All right. So let's see here. Varoo eases. It's easier for me to look it up than to follow the links. The great Leia Varoo came up with a way to visualize eases. Okay, we can go ahead and run this. Okay, so the first one is linear and the second one is nonlinear. We can even pick this. And so what this does is this gives us a visual way to see this. And so ease in means start slow, right? Ease out means, slow down, and ease in and out, right, means start slow and end slow. And the default here is linear, okay, and that's the default. What we want to do is say just ease in and ease out, right? Start slow, end slow, okay? And we hover over this, we're going to transition the property. It's going to wait 0.5 seconds, and then that's going to ease in if we hover off, okay? Right, and there's that flip. All right, so that right there is a long form. That's all the current properties in 2020, and there's a whole lot more coming. But for us, that's all we need to care about. We're going to comment that out, and now what we can do is actually use the shorthand. Okay, so opacity 1s, 0.5s is the delay, right? So in order, this is the thing to be transitioned or the property to be transitioned, okay? And I'm gonna write some pseudocode so we can see this. Okay, this is the property to transition, right? This is the time and duration. This is the delay, right? And this is the ease. Okay, right, it's the timing function, and you're just gonna fill in the gaps. Okay, what property is being transitioned? Opacity, right? In 1 second. How about we make it faster? 1 second, and make it even faster. A 1/4 second delay. And something. Let's go ahead and do, let's ease out. Okay, right, boom. And so now what we want to do is have it actually spin, right? So to do that, it's actually simpler than you might think. So in CSS, right, it's least surprise. Okay, there's this convention in programming called the element, the least surprise. If you have something called first, right, there's a good chance that there's something called second and third and fourth. And in CSS, we have we group selectors with commas. And if we wanted to have multiple transitions, well, we can do that same thing. You go comma, right? And what property do we want to transition, right, on that rotate? And that property that Josh answered for us is transform. And maybe I wanted to transform slower. So I'm going to say 2 seconds. And I want it to have 0 delay, like, and then I want it to be to ease in and out. All right, so now what we have is a 2 second delay, right? And one animation is being drawn in a half second. One animation is being drawn in 2 seconds. And your browser is saying, I'm going to take however far a distance is, in this case, 200 pixels, all right, and I'm going to do the math of dividing that up. Right? And I'm going to do the math about how each frame should be drawn, right? And this is where we get this concept of first frame and last frame. Okay, so every time I'm fixing CSS animations, and what the first thing I do is I just get rid of everything. I said, do you want this to work? Do this. Turn the transition off. Just turn it off, right? If you can get it to do this, you're halfway there. Okay. All right, good? With me? All right, so what we've done is we've broken this thing down in concepts. Okay, so conceptually, this is how this works, right? And we can come in here to our great CSS reference. We can click on this thing called animation, right? And we can see all the different, oops, we don't want that one. We're not there yet. We will get into, We're animating, but we're not using the animation property. Everybody, I know that's confusing. We're animating, but we're not using the animation property. The animation property allows us to do control all the frames in between. Maybe we want to have it do something different in the middle. Okay, right now we're saying figure out what it needs to look like from the start to the finish. You figure out all the frames in the middle browser. And so we can see this here, okay, about how it should look. The other thing that I wanted to show you with this, just forgot for a second what I was going to talk about. Oh, is a library to make this stuff go. Oh, all, that's what it's. All right, so some designers might say like, that's a lot of work. I have to list out everything I want to change. Well, yeah, that's the whole point of having granular control. And this is where I implore you designers, right? Don't be lazy. I'm going to show you something and then I'm going to say, don't do this. Okay, ready? So I'm going to show you something. Don't do this. There's a keyword called all, right? That says anything with a numerical value can be transitioned. Anything with a numerical value can be transitioned. So if I come into here and go 1s, oh, good. I just remember what I was going to talk about. Let's see. Colon active. Anything with a numerical value can be transitioned. I hate when he repeats himself. Get used to it. Okay. So visually, this doesn't look the same. This looks exactly the same, but in 1 second. We can even come in here and just go, give me an ease, give me an ease, give me an out. All right. And it's like, yay, right? This thing is working. Well, there's a problem with this. This keyword all basically says, I'm going to transition every single property that has a numerical value. You're like, so doesn't matter to me, but the browser is screaming at you. The browser is silently screaming because it's not performant now. You're kind of negating all of this. Well, what do I mean by this? Again, the great LeVaroux, right? And animatable. Let's see here. If you wanted to demonstrate this when we first got this, and I'm gonna hit a button, just hang on for a second. And so each one of these, like border radius, can be animated, right? Because it has a numerical value. We can do color because color has a numerical value. Opacity we just did. But we can't do font family because you can't go from Lobster to Comic Sans or Papyrus, right? So three fonts you shouldn't use. Good there. Okay, so if it has a numerical value, it can be animated. And down here at the bottom, it just says, you know, be careful because when you use the keyword all, this is happening. This is your browser secretly screaming. It's animating, right? Or attempting to animate every single property that can be animated. And that's not what we want our browser to do. So the keyword all exists, yes. Try to avoid it at all costs. All right, I'm gonna turn that off. All right, with me? Thumbs, check. Okay, all right, so avoid it. Okay. And if you like this stuff, you can make a career. There are people who one of your references for this class is Rachel Fowlhead, LinkedIn. Right, this is your reference there. Okay. She has made an entire. She's one of her specialties, right, is just strictly on CSS animation. Like you can have your Valhead, and many other people have just, you know, they made this the expertise and the focus of their careers. There's a lot here, as you can imagine. Okay, so this is actually one of the better courses on this topic, so highly recommend it. Again, we're using the topic of animation. We haven't used the animation keyword yet. All right, so we've talked about the concepts, right? We've talked about the pros and cons of this, right? Call and get practical. Well, what can we do with this? Here's a practical example. All right, A times 3, curly brace, link. All right, we're gonna make a nav. We're gonna make a navigation. It has 3 anchor links inside of that. They're gonna go link 1, 2, and 3, hit return on that. Heck, we can even do 5 of these. Okay, All right, so practical example. Okay. All right, we're going to make some navigation here. Okay, just some no links. All right, you got some navigation. You want it to, you know, be a little bit more engaging than this. Okay. All right, we already know about our link states. Okay, let's go ahead and get into this. First off, we're going to reset all of our link state, even for our visited state, because we want them to all be the same. We're going to get rid of that annoying text decoration that cuts through our descenders, calling we've had this lecture. Good, good. All right, maybe we give it a background of, what is it, cornflower blue. Okay. And we're going to give it some padding of 1em, right? And we know from last class, 1em is how many something something pixels? What's that magic number? Yell it out, chat it out. I'm gonna keep staring at you. Got a little bit of coffee left. 1em is how many pixels? Come on, y'all. All right, I'm not ending today's lesson until someone says that correctly.
16.
Thank you. 16, I'm not sure who that was because the screen's too small, but thank you. All right, so 1em is 16 pixels. So we have 16 pixels all around that. And we want to center align our text on this. And what is the method I want to use today? How about this? No. I'm drawing a blank here. There's so many methods to we can't use text align. Don't use text align center because it's not going to work for you. But neither is this, Colin. That should do it. Yeah. All right, that's our kludge for right now. Until I can't think of the better way right now. So I'm writing this is our kludge temporary solution because there's a better way. Right. We addressed that in class. Oh yeah, let me measure this out real fast. That is 48 pixels. That's why. There. If you make the line height the same as the height of the element, it tricks the browser into making this vertically level, right? Remember, because there's all those invisible lines that run through a page. We're just moving the invisible line down. All right, so there's that. And so let's just have some links, right? This is our navigation. Okay. And so we could do something like up in here, we can go nav, right? We can, you know, text align center on our navigation like so. Okay, so there is our navigation. We can come in here and go a : hover and comma a : active. Okay. We click in hold. Yeah. All right. So take care of, this is our first frame. Okay. I'm trying to be expedient here. This is how it looks before we do anything to it. Okay. This is how we want it to look. This is the end result or the last frame. All right. This is the last page in the flipbook. That was the first page in the flipbook. So we could do something very, very simple here. We just make the background color a different color, like coral. Okay, all right. Now notice I'm not dropping in any transitions. Okay, do this, please. Okay, all right. So we got this working. And now all we want to do is just add in the transition once we know that this is working. Okay, so we can hover, we can click and hold. Right, it's still going to give us that. And we can come in here and go transition. All right, and what property am I transitioning?
Background?
Background, perfect. Right, Andy, thank you. That's exactly what's happening. We're transitioning the background. Like what is changing on hover, right? And that's all we need to tell the browser. The browser's like, well, what do you want to transition? The background. Oh, perfect. Okay, and then we're gonna have it transition in 1 second, right? Or, you know, it's a navigation, so let's have it transition really, really quickly in a 1/4 second. And boom, there you go. right? You've just added this idea that to your background. And then maybe, right, when you hover over this, it bumps it down. So you can go margin top, right? You can go margin top, I don't know. Let's go 10 pixels. Right, so if I hover over this, it goes bloop. Oh, we can't because this thing is, oh darn, we can't push it down because these are inline elements, right? So what we need to do is we need to change these from display inline to display what? If we want them to all the way back to week 1, if we want them to look inline but keep have the best of both inline and block, we need to do inline block, right? All right, now that we have that, okay, there's our little boop, 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 right? Now our navigation is bumping down on each one of those, okay? So there it is, an inline block. Okay, I wonder if I can set it on the parent with it apply to the child. Nope, I can actually set it to the child. All right, and once we have Flexbox, we don't have to do this other hacky thing here. This is also a kludge for right now. Right, now why do I keep putting these kludges or these kludges, depending on what part of the world you're in? I want to show you that just because it works, there's good, better, best, right? And we got this thing coming to, and later on in the next lecture, another lecture is called Flexbox that allows us to, you know, deal with the stuff in a lot more like vertical alignment and horizontal alignment buttons inside of Illustrator than manually specifying each one. All right, so now we can come into here, and if we wanted to, we can say we're not going to use the keyword all. We're going to say, well, if I wanted to animate down, what do I want to do? Okay. And for right now, they're all going to move, okay, which is just fine. Margin top. Okay, in this case, I want the margin top to maybe animate slower. So we're going to make that animate in 1 second. And maybe I want it to have a delay of a 1/4 second. And this is a good place to stop lecture today. And we're going to ease this thing in. Good. All right, and there we go. All right, and if we wanted to, we can rotate this and use any of those transform properties. Okay, probably a more practical example, right, is to change the scale, right? Because maybe you want it to be a little bit bigger. So this is where we're going to transform this thing with a scale of 1.25, right? So make it 125% from 100. Okay, so on hover, boop, boop, boop. Okay, we're like, great, that's well and good, but we want it to transition. Okay, so right now the only thing that's transitioning is the background. I don't know why I'm making all these noises like boop, boop, boop. So sorry, that is really annoying. That's annoying. All right, so there's that. Now we want to transition both the background color and, all right. Andy, one more time, what property are we transitioning now to get it to scale up?
The transform property.
Perfect. Right? Thank you. All right, 0.5s. Okay, and save on that. There's a miscellaneous space. All right, there you go. Okay, so this is setting the foundations for animation. Okay, and what I don't want you to do is lose you about all the conceptual stuff. Think about, you know, find something cool in CodePen and ask yourself, like, keep asking yourself, how the heck does this thing work? Right? And then the better question is, all right, once I get it figured out how to work, okay, come into pen, okay, and fork it, fork the pen and see how this thing works. Okay, you now know how this is animated. Right? There's all this CSS properties that are being changed. All right, and I'm gonna stop recording.